next one is Saltspire. It's a towering kind of crystalline like fortress like tower. It's built upon a salt flat. It's home to kind of an enigmatic order of scholars who study the alchemical properties of salt. It is said that their archives hold secrets capable of reshaping the tides itself. Sometimes they're called tide mages or heralds of the tide. They have a lot of different kind of names. And so the focus here, the theme is kind of this kind of ocean-like theme. So it's kind of built on a salt flat. And so what this finger right here, this horn, it's a kind of a geographical feature called a horn. All of this right here used to be covered underwater right here. And so what I might want to do is maybe add a little bit of water around these areas on top of the tower to kind of show that this region was once covered in salt water. That's why it's called a salt pan, right? It dried up. And so now it's got a lot of salt in the soil. So the Saltspire. So let's go ahead and first add in the main location, which is obviously going to be a tower. So I'll go back to Fantasy World, type in tower. Here we go. I'm going to pick a tower that I like. There's a lot of little options here. What I don't want to do is pick one that I've already used. So I think I'll use this one, this human sandstone one. I kind of like that. And of course, what's always helpful is to kind of use other POIs as a guide. So you notice that this tower right here, I think that fits there. Let's make it a little bit bigger so it's kind of noticeable. I'm going to put it right here on this corner. And you know what I think I'll also do is I think I'm going to put it on top of a rock, so that way it's built on a sturdy foundation. So if I type in rock, there should be some nice rock stuff that I can add in here. So I look here. Let's maybe use a mesa for it. I think that should look good. Let's use this really short mesa right here. I'm going to make it smaller right here. I'm going to I think this looks good. Let's maybe bring the brightness down a little bit so it kind of matches. Put it right here. This is going to be kind of like a plateau rock. And that's great because remember, it creates height, 1, and 2, it creates this foundation, right? If all of this was once underwater, this land might not be the perfectly stable land that's necessary to place something like a tower, which is going to need strong foundation, right? And so placing it on maybe this rock, this mesa that I used right here, is a good way to make sure that that tower is indeed on a sturdy foundation. So now that we've added that part, we can go into the next part. I'm going to paint some water on the ground. I'm going to use this blue texture right here. I'm going to set to FG layer. I'm going to bring the opacity down because what I don't want to do is have it set to 100%, where when I cover it, it's just this blue. I want to have some of the land underneath of it. So I'll bring the opacity down, and then I'll go in like this. And what I can do is maybe even tides, like a tide comes out. Let's say there's a high tide, and I'll have some water cutting off this finger right here. And it fits in with the tide theme, right? So I'll put some water there so that kind of represents a high tide. And then I'll kind of just put some water blotches in here to kind of represent the tide is up. There we go. And now some of that is underwater, as you would kind of expect with the tide being up. And it fits in with the theme, right? It's these wizards, these mages are tied in with the tides. So it kind of makes sense to kind of add in a tide-like element. So now that we have that in there, I think that works out well. Let's go ahead and let's maybe add in just a couple more things. I've noticed that this area is kind of flat. And so some things to add that might be nice is maybe just throwing in just a couple little things. It's somewhat different from a marshland. It's kind of a mix between, it's like a fantasy. I would say that this is kind of a fantasy biome because it's got tides, it's got salty like water or salty like soil, but it's not necessarily, it can be a little bit of dew. It's kind of a fantasy biome, I would say, because it's kind of a mix between a marsh and a tidal like area. But I want to add something to it because I noticed that there isn't a whole lot kind of going on there. Like I have a lot of flat land, and what might be nice is to kind of maybe throw in some elements to kind of make it more interesting. So I'm kind of looking over the catalog and just kind of looking for some things that might work well here. You know what might work well? I think we can maybe just use these icebergs right here, and then let's make them stones instead. So I'll bring the brightness down so they kind of have a stone look. I'll make them small. And then what this will do is that I don't want my players to like have to travel for several days through this area where there's nothing really that they're interacting with. So I want to throw in maybe a couple like rock formations in here, and it kind of fits well with this because there's a rock formation right here. So we should probably throw in some more rock formations. So I'll throw in a couple of them, like one here, and in this way the players will have something to interact with, because when a time comes to make a battle map, there's not going to be much on the battle map except for just this flat grassland, right? And so what will make the combat more interesting is when they come upon these like rock-like formations, I'll have a rock formation to build where combat will take place, and the players will be able to travel up on top of things, jump down, throw things. They'll have a little bit more height and depth to work with when the combat comes. So it's nice to throw in these elements. Let's go ahead and throw in maybe one like up in the corner right here. And then what I'll do is I'll bring the scale down and just make some smaller ones. And don't forget to cluster them. Maybe put a couple here. Maybe put one right over here. A smaller one over here. And now we have these nice formations. And then I can go in with that path tool. And then when I go to connect, I'll go through this land right here, kind of traveling through. And then I go through this first rock formation. And then we'll go to the next rock formation. And then to this rock formation. And then finally, kind of going towards here. There you go. And now you kind of have a nice path as well, connecting those points of interest that kind of connect over to here. So now we have a lot of good locations here. I generally factor in things like, oh, what kind of combat will take place here? It kind of helps me to add points of interest and where to add things. So it's kind of helpful. One other thing I might want to consider doing as well is just maybe throwing in some random kind of trees just to add in some final little details. So that way not everything is flat. Because right now I have a lot of flat land. So let's just take a couple trees, and I think I'll use the similar trees that I used over here. I think these ones work good. And don't forget to overlap. So I have this nice path right here. Let's have a couple trees overlap the path. Let's have a couple overlap the rock formation. Let's have a couple just randomly hanging out over here. Some over here overlapping this. Over here, here, and then just a couple single onesie kind of randos, just kind of further as you go up, right through here like this. We'll put a couple here. Technically, in reality, these trees probably wouldn't grow here because they're salt, but it's a fantasy-like place, right? So it's okay. And if you want to show that, I can just kind of remove the trees from the upper part up here. The trees exist here, but once you start going higher up to where the tides come in, then you probably won't have a lot of grassland, right? So it kind of makes sense to have very little grass and vegetation because much of that land has been taken with salt. But you can always do a fantasy thing, right? You can have maybe a fantasy tree or a fantasy type of